This hour on I24NEWS, Saudi Arabia says it will seek the death penalty for 5 suspects in the killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has issued new sanctions on 17 Saudis over the murder, a murder the Saudi regime insists was a rogue operation.
Absolutely. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has nothing to do with this issue.
In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is struggling to stabilize his government following the resignation of his defense minister over the Gaza ceasefire. And now there are calls for early elections.
The pressure is also building on British Prime Minister Theresa May. She is facing a party rebellion over a Brexit plan with the European Union.
I think members of the public want the government to get on with delivering on Brexit for them. And as I said earlier, am I going to see this through? Yes.
From the I24 News studios in Times Square in New York, this is Crossroads with David Schuster and Tal Heinrich.
There are new developments this evening in the case of murdered Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Saudi Arabia's top prosecutor says that he will seek the death penalty against 5 men suspected of killing Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate 2 months ago in Turkey.
The Saudi regime is also changing its story once again as to exactly how Khashoggi died. Meanwhile, officials here in the U.S. have lodged sanctions against 17 Saudis for their alleged involvement in the killing. I24 News correspondent Ariel Hickson has details.
Mistakes happen. Sometimes people abuse their authority. Sometimes people exceed their authority.
Mistakes happen. That's the official word from Saudi Arabia's foreign minister explaining the murder of Washington Post writer Jamal Khashoggi. In a press conference today, Saudi officials claimed an unnamed man ordered the operation, but they insist the unnamed man is not the Saudi crown prince. And the deputy public prosecutor says they will be seeking the death penalty for 5 of the 11 people they have indicted. The Saudi story has been a moving target. First, they insisted Khashoggi left the consulate alive. Now they say a 15-member team comprised of negotiators, intelligence, and logistics officials flew to Turkey to try to persuade him to return to the kingdom. Then they claim the head of negotiations saw Khashoggi when returned and decided to kill him, administering a lethal injection and dismembering his body. Though the whereabouts of his remains are still a mystery. The latest story is being met with continued skepticism by Turkey's foreign minister, who said the latest, most recent explanation is not satisfactory. He questions how Khashoggi could have been killed in the moment, but the Saudi team had all the necessary materials to execute him, dismember, and dispose of his body.
For more on the U.S. sanctions, let's bring in senior diplomatic correspondent Nina Larson. Nina, first let's look at Saudi Arabia. Their chief prosecutor has released yet another version of the events.
That's absolutely right, Tal. We've had several narratives coming out of Saudi Arabia in particular that have been completely at odds with what Turkish authorities have been saying for the past couple of months. This one, the latest one, seems to be along the lines of one we've heard before, an interrogation gone terribly wrong. And the real question is, was this premeditated or not? And that's certainly the question that the Turkish foreign minister is asking, as you saw in that piece. What appears to have happened, and again, I'm saying appears to have happened, according to the Saudi prosecutor, who has been on the ground and has been working in tandem with Turkish authorities on all of this, says that what seems to have happened is that Mr. Khashoggi was involved in some kind of struggle, and was then given a sedative of some kind of overdose, which caused his death. And then whether that was ultimately deliberate or not, those concerned in that 15-strong hit squad tried to cover up the evidence by dismembering the body.
And Nina, what do you make of Saudi Arabia's deputy prosecutor, saying that he will seek the death penalty against 5 of the suspects?
Well, again, I don't want to speculate, David, but it seems a bit convenient that the only witnesses to this crime, the top suspects there, 5 out of the 11 that have been charged today, are, could face the death penalty. I mean, they're the only ones that really know what happened in that room. It's unlikely that we'll ever hear from them. And the main person that's being held accountable is a former Saudi intelligence official that was supposed to have gone rogue, as the White House has been saying, and now the Saudis are saying. This takes along the narrative that Donald Trump put forward almost 2 months ago as well, that this was somehow Saudi officials working way beyond their mandate.
How's Turkey reacting to the statement from the prosecutor?
With deep skepticism, Tal, as you heard the Turkish foreign minister saying that he thinks this was all very premeditated, that there were certain forensics experts, for example, within this 15-strong team that were sent especially in the day before when Mr. Khashoggi was due to go in to get his marriage documents. But there's another element to this altogether now, another complicating factor. There are reports that the Turks are discussing with the White House that they want Fethullah Gulen, that alleged Turkish coup leader that resides in rural Pennsylvania. They've wanted him extradited for a very long time now. But the White House and the State Department are denying that those discussions are anything to do with the Khashoggi case.
Nina Larson, our senior diplomatic correspondent, reporting from Washington. Nina, thank you.
To discuss it further, let's bring in international security analyst Martin Himmel joining us here. Great to have you as always, Martin. First, what do you think about the Saudi prosecutor's statement? Did you expect anything else? He said that it was an intelligence officer, not the Saudi crown prince, who ordered this murder.
Look, in the Middle East, emotional truth is much more important than factual truth. In other words, truth that rings right is much more important than what the facts are. And this is clearly a case of
Only in the
truth.
Middle East?
Well, especially in the Middle East and in the White House a little bit. So when they get the emotional sync together between the White House and Riyadh, it's truth. And this is basically the case right here. They had to come up with something that's palatable. Listen, we've all forgotten about the fact that they sent a forensic specialist and they sent a lot of tools there to dismember a human being. So it didn't seem like they were going there to bring him back. But what's important here is that they have to come up with something that rings acceptable or plausibly acceptable in the United States so Trump can deliver it to his constituents here and keep relations intact. That's what this is all about. Keep relations intact. Whether they're going to chop somebody's head off there for this or not is really irrelevant to the crucial issue. Can they keep the relationship intact?
The Turks have said that they've shared their surveillance audio with several countries, including now Saudi Arabia. Is that perhaps why the Saudis have now yet again changed the chronology or perhaps what happened inside the room because of they need to match up with what is being heard?
I think that's a very accurate position there because there was a fight. We know there was a fight. There was he was killed. A sedative can sound like a strangulation because you can't really scream and yell when you're being strangled. So, yeah, they have to make it work and in sync with what the Turks say. And again, there's a lot of silent quid pro quos here. I'm sure Saudi Arabia and Turkey, who do not get along very well, I'm sure Saudi Arabia is giving something to Turkey to get Turkey to agree to this emotional truth. And maybe it also involves Trump and Ankara also there to agree to this emotional truth. It might not be having the leader of this alleged coup being extradited to Turkey, but it could be something about restraining activities or any other thing that helps the Turks somewhat.
So, Martin, now that the United States, the White House has imposed economic sanctions against 17 Saudis, does it mean that's it? No more questions asked? This is the White House response. It will end there?
A lot of it depends on domestic politics. After all, Trump is now in a war with Democrats. The Democrats have taken over the House. The Democrats want to discredit Trump wherever they can. It will be used as a tool. The Saudi Arabia issue will be used as a tool. Trump associates himself with murderers, justifies himself with murderers. And Trump will try to say, well, it's all clear what's happened and preserve the relationship as it is. So it's a function of domestic politics as well, whether this dies a quick death or is in the media somewhat. And when Adel al-Jubeir, the Saudi foreign minister, says that this was a rogue operation, that's really not believable, is it? Do you have proof otherwise? Do you have something? Again, it's this issue of emotional truth. Can you factually stick it so hard in their eye that the emotional truth doesn't prevail? It does prevail.
Briefly, do you believe that it's true that the Trump administration is considering extraditing Fethullah Gulen?
I don't think so. That would cause such an uproar. But I think there's many things that the Trump administration can do with Turkey and maybe lift certain business sanctions. International security analyst Martin Himmel. Martin, thank you. Appreciate it. Still ahead, British Prime Minister Theresa May is fighting
fighting to save her job and her Brexit draft deal. There are now indications that the UK Parliament will vote down the draft in the weeks ahead, and a March deadline is looming larger.
And in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hearing calls for early elections as he struggles to keep his government together.